Chut or Chud?
Chut Buckby.
Chut Buckby is a cursed version of myself, David.
Old King Buckby. There's been a haunting.
There has been a straight up haunting. It's been probably a little while since you've listened to Video Game Podtimism, person who's listening to this podcast. If you're a regular listener, you'd say, hey, normally they do it every week, but this one, probably there was about 2 weeks between when you heard our last one. There's been a haunting.
There's been a haunting. Strange things have happened to the audio from the last episode, which is also very fitting for the game we talked about.
Yeah, given the context, it was like it was very odd. We poured our hearts into recording a 2-day multiple part 3-hour episode of
3 hours.
3 hours
Our longest,
of Nier Automata.
our magnum opus, truly.
Yeah, and then I opened up the audio files and it's like, hey, actually I spliced together somehow David's audio too, despite the fact I didn't have your audio on my computer at that point. I don't know what wires got crossed.
Is that real?
Yeah, I didn't download any of your shit. Genuinely, I don't know how this has happened.
Whoa. Wow.
Yeah, it's there's been a haunting. I think is really the only thing. I almost made references to the game Nier Automata, but contextually, nobody would have any fucking clue what we're talking about because they haven't heard that episode.
They haven't heard the episode.
Dude.
Yeah, it's very in keeping with the ethos of the game. So if you've played it, you get that this is very funny.
This is the final ending.
This is the final ending of the game. This is ending Z.
Yeah, double Z or
ending
whatever.
Z.
Yeah.
Double Z.
Dude, yeah, holy hell. So anyway, I guess we're just going to pick up the pieces and try again. Hopefully this one doesn't cross any wires. Although I suspect being that we're not talking about Nier Automata or Automata, whatever it is, then it probably will be fine.
Yoko Taro will let us be for this podcast.
Yeah, his dark video game magic will not come to haunt our audio anymore. Please,
Truly.
Yoko Taro, please.
He's a powerful technomancer.
Yeah, dude. Apparently, I underestimated his dark magic. Anyway, it's Video Game Podtimism. It's the Optimist video game variety show where two best friends talk about the wonderful world of gaming. My name is Chase, and my favorite bit that is now lost to the sands of time was when we almost fell asleep halfway through the first part of the episode. Where we were nearly dead.
Nearly dead.
Nearly.
And I'm David, and my favorite part of the episode that was lost to the sands of time was the second part of the episode, because I felt like it had some legit interesting analysis from Chase Albee, particularly.
Dude.
You had
Gone.
some things. You had some thoughts about this game, bro.
I had so many things to say.
Chase was about to win the video game Pulitzer for this podcast, and it's just up in smoke.
It's still here. I still have it. It's just very cursed. The audio is cursed. And so like sometimes we'll be talking over each other. You just say bye to me at random increments during the podcast, which
that was the scariest
horrifying.
Part.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like it feels threatening. It feels threatening that happened.
It's like Yoko's like speaking to us, like telling us goodbye to this podcast. It's feel like I'm in a fucking Jinjo Ito comic and gonna get pulled into the podcast here in a second.
If you don't take the name of my game out of your mouth, I'm gonna get you. That's my Yoko Taro impersonation.
It sounds just like him.
It's just like him.
Anyway, so yeah, we're gonna talk about some games that we're playing this week, and then we're gonna do another attempt at a fart sniffy conversation today.
Yes.
And yeah, that's it. With that said, though, David, have you been partaking in that illicit drug known as video games?
Dude, I was taking it straight to the dome all weekend.
Wow, nice.
Just 24/7 of gaming. It was crazy.
You're cranking out some real video moments.
Dude, I was cranking hard.
Okay, tell me about it. Tell me about the video games you've been playing.
Demon Souls. Demon Souls.
It's all there ever was. It's all there will be.
The last time I had talked to you, I think I had like just beaten the Dragon God.
Yeah, that's correct.
And
Which is like a little bit into the game, right? Like you had
you said I was doing it out of order because I had essentially done the first world and then I did the whole second world,
which is inadvisable for those of you who maybe are thinking about playing this game. I think David did this in an interesting way, but I'm not surprised that you beat it, if I'm being honest. Like you went through like hell to beat those first couple of like end level bosses, and so I'm sure the rest of the game was just like, oh, these guys can't touch me. I've already gone Super Saiyan.
Pretty much. Like the rest of the bosses were really quite easy. I kind of just like not one-shotted, but like one playthrough, a good handful of them.
Jesus, dude.
And even then, like I didn't even, like the Penetrator I did in one shot.
Right. Who, like actually one shot or just one try?
One try through. One try. Which try? Got him.
Penetrator Demon Souls. Oh yeah, that guy was kind of a bastard. He was pretty tough, so I'm surprised that you got him in one go.
Yeah, the only one that fucked me up was the old monk because people just kept on backstabbing me when I walked through the door.
Oh yeah, dude.
That was very annoying.
So for those who haven't played the game or maybe don't have the context, there's a boss in Demon Souls called the Old Monk, which is other players that sign up to like be in this boss fight. And so like they put you through this long cutscene every time you want to go fight them, which is essentially a way of finding a player. And then they find one and then they wait for you and they fight you. Sometimes you'll get somebody who like, I got so many different players playing through this. There were a bunch of people who like bowed before it, like the fight would begin. But there's like you were saying, a bunch of knobs who will just stand behind the door and stab you as you enter through the fucking fog.
It's messed up, man.
Yeah.
It's messed up. So that one was the most annoying.
Yeah.
But all the others, even Old King Alant was maybe like a couple playthroughs.
I mean, I feel like with that one, Alant is like essentially the final boss of the game.
Yeah.
There's another boss, but it's sort of like not really challenging, or it's not intended to be, I suppose. But that one took me a while. I feel like there's a couple of runs that you have to do just to sort of figure out his moveset, but he got me with that like level draining attack a couple of times, and I was like not feeling strong.
Yeah, I had to one time like go and just soul farm for a bit, but I had a good spot to go to, so I got real beefy pretty quick.
Wow. Okay. David the old one, dude. You got it.
David the old one. It was fun.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. So now I'm thinking of playing all the other From Software games.
This is typically how it goes.
So I'm just like, people say that this one's the hardest one, and that also Sekiro's the hardest one from what I've heard. So I guess I'm ready for all the others in between. Maybe?
I think so. Like I've noticed that the DLC that they put out for most games typically is really fucking hard. So like the DLC for, I think it's Dark Souls 3 was really hard. The DLC for Bloodborne is a real bastard. But the main games, I think if you found Demon Souls pretty straightforward, you'll find the rest of like the Dark Souls and Bloodborne's pretty straightforward. I think Bloodborne will be the only one that will take just a little bit of adjustment to, because it wants you to play it faster than Demon Souls or Dark Souls plays.
Sure.
Jesus, that's crazy. So yeah, what's your overall take on the game after having gotten done with it?
I really enjoyed it. It's good combat.
Yeah.
The graphics were amazing. It's tough, but fair. Very, very much so. Like I didn't ever feel like it was super cheap. And I felt like if you were just kind of mindful about your surroundings and read the messages, you'd be able to like avoid all of the bullshit traps and jump scares essentially that they hide for you. I'm curious as to how I would have enjoyed the game if I had done it in a more traditional way. Because because my boss progression went Phalanx, Tower Knight, Armor Spider, Flame Lurker, Dragon God.
Right, which is like,
and then
it's a weird order. I totally understand why you played it that way, but like again, for those who maybe aren't like super familiar with the game, you're essentially doing an easy boss, a harder boss, and then maybe a little bit easier of a boss, and then a hard boss, and you're going in an odd order that doesn't usually scale with the difficulty. Like, I think the quote unquote normal or easier route to go through it is to play the first level of every world, and then sort of go back through and sweep through them.
I did not do that.
No, you pushed until the game gave way.
And then before I went to the third world, I made it all the way to the penetrator and like beat all those dudes up to him, and then just dipped because I had evacuate. So I just went back to the Nexus and just like leveled up a shit ton because there was so many souls in that level before him.
Yeah.
And then I just mowed through everybody else after that.
Good Lord, dude. That's wild. You've had a very interesting experience with this game.
It was like everyone in the third world, pretty easy. Everyone in the fourth world, pretty easy. And fifth world was a joke. Fifth world I just destroyed.
That's
just
crazy.
Like, maybe did the whole thing one time. I don't think I died at all in the
Valley of Defilement.
The Valley of Defilement. I don't think I died once.
That's fucking bananas, because I died a lot in the Valley of Defilement.
No, I had everything. So I had like the plague resistance ring and the poison resistance ring, and I was strong enough to like get through all the muck. It was just annoying because I don't like moving slow in games. It
is sort of frustrating. That level specifically is like, can you just stand and walk and that be your level for a little while?
Yeah. But it was a fun experience though. Just the sense of accomplishment.
Yeah.
And the sense of you are beating these giant, powerful beings.
Yeah.
It feels good. I feel like From Software makes that really drives home that feeling in their games by the difficulty, the lore of the game, and just the visuals and the interesting design of the levels and the characters and everything. So it's just very satisfying to play through.
Did you dig into any of the kind of like environmental storytelling that they did? Like, were you up on any of the lore or the story or anything?
A little bit, but not too much.
Yeah.
And my one gripe is that it sent me into New Game Plus like right afterwards, so I couldn't go back and do any of like the side stuff that I missed.
Sure, yeah.
Because I wanted to fight those dragons. I never fought the dragons. So I'm just like, bastards. I wanted to take you on.
Got to go back through.
As a powerful man, but I got to go back through New Game Plus, and they got to be stronger now. So now I got to go and just beat everything before I go back and beat them.
Yep. I think, so something people bring up a lot when like they're talking about what makes the FromSoft games really good is a lot of the stuff you've mentioned already, but I think the environmental storytelling is a big part of why it's heralded by so many people who like that kind of storytelling, meaning that they tell you very little, right? Like there's not that many cutscenes. There's not a lot of dialogue. There's just sort of like they're telling a story with literally how the world is set up and what's like going on in it.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And there's a lot of like meaning you can derive just from like what happened here. Like what's going on here.
Yeah.
And they give you just enough that like you can sort of suss that out if you want to, but like it's almost optional, right? Like you don't really need to know that to play the game or to enjoy the game. Because it has other stuff to enjoy, but I think that that's something that like they did so well, even in Demon Souls. I think it's better in Dark Souls and especially in Bloodborne. But yeah, I think that's a really, really cool part of these games is like you can really dig in and soak in the story without like just reading an audio log or something like that.
Sure.
So it's interesting. I really like the way that they do story here.
That's true. One of my larger gripes with games in general right now is games that require you to read a lot of audio logs for the lore, but don't allow you to zoom in and make the text larger.
Yeah. No, reading is an issue in a lot of video games right now.
Reading on my TV from like on my couch, I'm like straining my eyes. Like, let me just zoom in, fill this text to the whole TV so I can actually read it leisurely.
I need size 50 point font, please.
I know, I sound like fucking grandpa gamer, but for real. Like, I'm not trying to blow my eyes out doing this.
No, dude, I have a similar issue. Like the room that I play video games in most of the time is like the TV's a little bit farther away, and so sometimes text is a fucking problem for me.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
You already got those glasses.
Yeah, I know.
You don't need a new prescription anytime soon, that's for sure.
No, I hope not. Yeah, so fuck yeah, Demon Souls. What's maybe next on your list of FromSoft games that you're thinking about getting into?
I was looking at just getting the Dark Souls trilogy, which has the remastered Dark Souls and then 2 and 3 for like $40, something like that.
That's pretty good.
And then I already have Bloodborne downloaded.
Yeah.
So that'll probably be the next one to really. It'll be Bloodborne.
Yeah, it's interesting because like you'll definitely see how the games have progressed over the years and stuff like that. And I think especially like the jump from Demon Souls to Dark Souls for me is a pretty significant leap. Just as far as like the map is incredible. Like that alone is so significant of being able to like traverse the world in a way that isn't just linear. Like Demon Souls is pretty much just run to the end of the level, right? Like it's still really good, and the world is so well realized that that's not really an issue. But Dark Souls does really well is the like you fight in a straight line, and then you curve back around at some point and kick down a ladder, and it's like, oh shit, this is where I started. So like I just can cut off this whole part of the level if I don't want to go over there. And like that stuff just happens throughout the entire game. So like you're able to get from like the end zone to the beginning in like just a minute or two, because you're able to run through these like all these places. So that stuff is like really, really cool. And then also the introduction of the Estus Flask in Demon Souls is like a game changer, just as far as like the healing in the game. It changes quite a bit.
And what is the Estus Flask? Is that similar to like the seeds in Sekiro?
I think so. So like the Estus Flask essentially is just healing that will replenish whenever you rest. And so it changes the game, whereas in Demon Souls you have a ton of the little like healing leaves or whatever.
Yeah.
Which can lead to sort of problems, right? Where like you think you're doing really well and you use like 20 of them, and then the next run you have like none. And so you have to figure out like, how the hell do I do
farming.
This? Yeah, exactly. Whereas in Dark Souls, you have an Estus Flask and you can upgrade it and stuff. So like you get more drinks from it or whatever, but it essentially is communicating to you that you're supposed to be able to get through this next section without like, going back and farming for healing items. Like maybe you're a little under leveled, but like for the most part, it's like you have what you need to get through here.
Sure.
And so I kind of like that it's reinforcing the fact of like, just keep going, just keep practicing. You'll get this. Hell yeah. Is that all you're playing right now?
Played that, and I played Rocket League.
How are you improving at Rocket League? Last week you said you were a little rough.
I'm still bad.
Okay.
But I'm working. See, before I was detrimental to my team. Now I am slightly less detrimental to my team. I'm working to be neutral.
Sure. If you can at least break even, yeah.
Yeah, if I can break even with the good things and the bad things I do, I'm okay.
Yeah, sure.
And then we just got up to go from there.
Yep.
So I played all the tutorial and everything, and every once in a while I'll just go on and play a casual game, and starting to get some more goals.
Hell yeah.
I'm starting to get a little more of a hang of it. So I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Nice.
Just really takes a concerted effort.
Yeah, for sure. You want to you have to want to get better at Rocket League.
You really do.
Yeah.
And there's still some things about like the positioning or how to control myself in the air that I just am not good at.
Yeah,
or don't understand.
Fair enough.
But we'll get there.
For sure.
What about you? What you been playing?
A bunch of like little tidbits. I've just been munching on video games recently. My weekly check-in of course I'm still fucking playing Bloodborne. I can't stop. I'm nearly.
Are you playing through it again?
That's it. Yeah. So okay. So the lost episode last week, I mentioned that I started playing Bloodborne again, and I've gotten through it almost entirely again. I was like, let me just try a different class, and then now I'm almost at the end of the game again. That's not a flex. This is like. This is me saying I have a Bloodborne problem. I realized that in the first playthrough that I did recently, I shot myself in the foot because there's like diminishing returns with some of the stats that scale in this game. And I put way too many stats into one of the like options that I had, whereas I should have been scaling like health and stamina. And so by the time I got to the end of the game, it was fucking hard because I had like no health and not very much stamina.
What was all your stats in?
What is it? Blood Tinge? Which is like, it does more damage for these little gems that you socket into your weapons. And so potentially you can do a lot of like elemental damage. So like fire or bolt damage, which is like lightning.
Sure.
But when you get to 50 points of that, the returns of how much damage you're actually doing are not really all that effective. And so you should start putting it into other stuff. In the meantime, like, right, if you get all the rest of the stats to the point where they're good, then you can go back and put more in. But I was just slamming stats into Blood Tinge, and it was not great because, again, I had no health. And so when I'm going to fight the fucking orphan of Kos, he's a real bastard, and he hits you in just a couple of hits, you're done. So I fucked up. But I started again. I got a better build this time, and now I'm just running through it. It's real satisfying.
There you go. Balance build.
A little bit more. I'm doing a skill-based build this time, so I'm using the threaded cane to fight.
Is it like dexterity build?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So yeah, doing that. Still playing Persona 5. It's still phenomenal, and like it's yeah, I just love the game. The characters are all just so good. I'm beyond the point where I've gotten before, and I really hope to finish the game because it is quite long. I think I'm like 30 hours into it now, but Jesus, man, I just love the conceit of the world and like all the different places that you're able to go to, all the like palaces that you're able to invade and shit like that. It's just so fun. Reminds me a lot of like Psychonauts in the way that like each level is such a departure from the last one.
Sure.
That there's a lot of intrigue just pulling me along of like, well, what's the next place going to look like?
Yeah.
How's the next one going to play? So that's all quite fun.
That's always nice about a game that's diversified like that.
Yeah, where like the levels are distinct from one another. So that like, what's another one? Odyssey did this, right? Like every time you go to another world, you're like, holy shit, like this is a totally different place than the last one.
Yeah. Nintendo games, I think, are really good about that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Like Breath of the Wild too, like those zones and everything are all very, very different from one another. So yeah, that's been really fun. I downloaded a whole bunch of Game Pass games on Xbox recently, so I've been digging through those. Re-downloaded the glorious Viva Pinata Trouble in Paradise.
Whoa.
Yeah. That's been
all
weird
right. So is Viva Pinata kind of like Animal Crossing, but for pinatas?
It's a little different. I'm trying to think of like what kind of game it's similar to. I mean, so there's a little bit of Animal Crossing in the sense that like you can change the environment that you're in. But I think the main point is maybe closer to like a Stardew Valley or something like that, where you're building this like space to attract pinatas, which are animals essentially. And they all have like requirements for like when they show up and when they'll actually decide to join your farm. It's definitely a game that's fun with just discovery and like figuring out like what new kinds of pinatas will show up to your farm.
Sure.
Dude. Yeah.
It's a weird sentence.
I know. Yeah. Oh, God.
What pinata will show up to my farm today?
I planted a bunch of flowers. Which one will come now?
Are the flowers pinatas as well?
Just flowers. Just regular flowers.
Just regular flowers? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I played this game a lot back in the day, and so it's very much like a fun little walk down memory lane. The gameplay does feel a little dated at this point. Like, yeah, it's pretty slow, and like the UX is a little bit, it's like 10 years old at this point. So, there's a lot of stuff that could be improved, but it is still the core part of the gameplay is still pretty compelling to me. So, loving Viva Pinata still.
Awesome.
I'm playing also through Dragon Quest 11 on the Xbox right now.
Beating up some slimes.
I haven't really fallen into a Dragon Quest super hard before. Like, I think I played, God, I can't remember which one it was, but whatever one was on PlayStation 2, I think that was like 5 maybe or something.
I remember that, actually, when you started playing that game.
Yeah.
You were into it. You were about it for a bit.
I was, but I never really got super far. Like, I didn't get through to the part where the game's like got its hooks in me. And so, like, I just kept hearing people talk about how good this game is. And so I, wanted to give it a fair shake. And I'm glad that I did because it is really, really enjoyable. I'm trying to think about how best to explain this, but like, it's so archetypically a fantasy JRPG, like,
sure,
as a good thing. Like, I think, there's some games that are like that maybe don't necessarily age super well. And I think that the game does require a little bit of patience for it to kind of get going, but the world is gorgeous. That's one thing. So like just being there feels really nice. The combat's like pretty good, but again, takes kind of a second to get interesting until like more characters are in your party.
Yeah.
And then the actual story is like actually pretty interesting once you get past a certain point. There's like sort of a twist that I wasn't expecting that I was like, oh, okay, now this is very, very interesting to me.
What happens? Can I know? I'm never going to play this game.
Yeah, sure. I'll cut this out. Essentially like, so that part of the story definitely has got me interested. Plus, like, again, like I said, the world is just so charming and so beautiful that like it's nice just to go wander around in there. The only other
Dragon Ball Z art.
I mean, pretty much like it looks so much like that. The main character looks like Trunks.
Guy.
Yeah.
It's the same guy who did Dragon Ball Z.
Toriyama, is that the dude? Yeah. So it's really nice to be there. So yeah, that's been enjoyable. I'm starting to put a few too many JRPG irons in the fire, so I'm being careful with
dangerous.
Yeah, not starting another one. And the last game and the game that I've been playing by far the most of is this game called Undermine.
Indie pick of the week.
Hell yeah, dude. So Undermine is a this is going to sound pretty typical, but it is a
dick melting roguelike.
close. It is a dungeon crawling roguelike.
Oh, okay. Yeah, your second most favorite genre.
Yeah, exactly. It looks gorgeous. First thing, like it's visually just beautiful. It's got this like sort of 32-bit style art. So like think Link to the Past or something like that. But it looks so good. Like they've they've up-resed it.
You doing okay over there?
Yeah, I was just having like burpees. Let me see if I can pull some up. Yeah, I guess I'll like send you some of these so you can check them out. But like essentially it looks very, very good. It looks like Link to the Past if it was in 4K. So that part of it is really enjoyable for me. It also like visually, stylistically looks definitely like it's in the Zelda family. Like if somebody said this was like, a Zelda knockoff, I'd be okay with that. It reminds me a lot of Moonlighter, that game that came out last year, or didn't come out last year, but I played last year, where the point of the game is essentially just going into these dungeons and trying to get through like to the boss. Then you go to sort of the next level and keep doing it. It doesn't have the aspect of Moonlighter that I loved, where you're like the shopkeep during the day. So you're essentially just a series of people going through a level trying to get to the bottom. Kind of plays like Rogue Legacy, and then you're just one peasant from the next peasant that keeps running through.
Sure.
And it's been really fun. It is punishingly difficult, like really, really hard, to the point where I might say it's like a little too hard at points.
Sure.
I've put a bunch of time into it, and there have definitely been moments where I'm like, this is more frustrating than it is fun.
Sure.
But I can tell that it's definitely taking a lot of influence from something like Spelunky, which is also incredibly difficult, but does get easier as you play it, because you sort of learn like how the things in the level will operate.
Sure.
It also kind of plays like Binding of Isaac in the sense of like you get a bunch of like different power-ups that are helping you go through the level, and like that's the gameplay sort of feels punishing in the way that Binding of Isaac did. But yeah, I think I like it quite a bit. It plays very tight. Like the gameplay just feels very good. I wish it was just like a few notches less difficult because like just like some of the sheer numbers in it. Sometimes I'm like, I just took like 40 points of damage for getting hit once. And there's like one piece of food on this level that'll heal me for 20. So I'm not really even healing for like the one hit I just took in this like barrage of bullets coming at me.
Damn.
Like, it's really, really difficult. And I think like the point is to try and not get hit at all. Whereas I think Moonlighter was a little bit more forgiving of like, here's a little bit more health, and like we're giving you the keys that you'll need to unlock chests to get more recovery items and shit. But yeah, I think that's overall been my favorite one. I'll probably have beaten it by the next time we talk. I'm about a little more than halfway through that one right now.
Cool. Nice.
Yeah. All this though will bring me to my Podtimistic thing of the week, David.
Let's hear it.
It is handheld emulators, David.
Ooh, I wonder why.
So the last week or so, I've sort of discovered the I guess subculture. I don't know if I would even call it that, but
subculture.
There's a lot of people who are really into handheld emulation, and specifically the devices around that, right? So I've only ever really known this through like hacked 3DSs or hacked PSPs and shit like that.
Yeah.
There's ways to do that, and I'd done it back in the day, but there's this whole market of handheld devices, and they are confusing legally. Like I don't really know how they exist.
Yeah, seems strange.
Because a lot of them come with games already on them, and then you can put games on them. But of course, my law-abiding self, I am only using ROMs of games that I myself have backed up as a way of retaining my physical property. So I am not playing illegal games.
Yeah, he would never do that.
No, that's a nasty boy thing to do, and I would not partake.
Very nasty.
No. So anyway, I'm just like so interested in this. There's so many YouTube videos and like people like doing very high quality glossy walkthroughs of like almost ASMR level stuff of like, okay, here's my walkthrough with the RG351P. We're going to boot up Banjo-Kazooie and walk through the first level. I've got a frame rate counter up there on the top right just to kind of see how it's going. Like all that sort of stuff. It's just, I don't know, fascinating and satisfying. So I've been way into that. Yeah, I mostly got this because I want to play my definitely own version, my own copy that I have of the Fire Emblem games for the GBA. and sort of get through those. And yeah, there's a lot of options because the emulators run pretty well. So there's a lot of stuff you can play.
Very cool.
Do you have something fueling your sense of Podtimism this week, David?
I do.
What is it?
It's a sense of scale.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah.
Demon Souls was really good at that with the first level where you're in Boletaria and you're just like looking up at these massive castle gates.
Yep.
You're just like, what awaits me inside? How did this kingdom ever fall in the first place with a castle this massive? And then the one that really sticks out to me, oh God, is the Storm King.
Oh, that big like manta ray.
The music and just the visuals. Oh my God, it was so fucking cool. It was so cool. Also, by the way, funny thing about those creatures in that game is that when I was in the 5th grade, there was a science project. I don't know if you remember this, but we had to create an alien and then create a diagram or like a model of it.
I do remember this, David.
Do you remember what I did?
Yeah, it's like this creature, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It was called the Satyrian shark, and it was essentially a giant stingray that flies with like tendrils underneath it. More like a giant tentacruel.
Yeah.
But very similar to these creatures. I was like, I'm fighting the creature I made as a child. It was wild. And then fucking Storm King comes out of nowhere with that cool music and it just cuts back to where you are and you just see him slowly flying in the sky, just massive compared to all these other dudes. And he comes down and it's just like flies over you. It's just like all menacing and just like you can feel the wind just rushing by you.
Yeah.
Oh man, that was a special experience right there.
Yeah, they really nail that like Shadow of the Colossus style scale fighting.
Oh
where like you feel tiny compared to these things.
Tiny.
Yeah.
Had to run and get that sword.
Yeah, like Stormbringer or whatever it is.
Storm Ruler.
That's correct.
Please. So yeah, that was a very cool boss fight. That was a very cool boss fight.
I love it in Demon Souls too because it pushes their narrative farther of like trying to tell you are not a big deal in this world. You're just a tiny little dude wandering around fighting these like old gods essentially.
Pretty much.
And it feels it adds to the idea whenever you beat a level that you have accomplished something that is monumental because you are tiny. These are big monsters and there's a lot of challenge like coming your way, but no, you're able to overcome it. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's great stuff.
That was good.
This game played with a lot. Obviously, Shadow of the Colossus did a lot of scale work. I'm trying to think of some other shit because it's definitely happened. The Reapers in Mass Effect, I remember being kind of a big deal because they were like fucking enormous.
Definitely.
Especially in the third one.
In a similar sense, but a little different. Whenever you can go to like the tallest peak in a game and then like jump off or like fly off or something.
Yeah, true.
That's a different type of scale. Not like an enemy scale, but like a world scale. That's always very enjoyable as well.
You can feel how big the space is around you.
Yeah, jumping off Avengers Tower in Spider-Man.
Yep.
It's a pretty good one.
Katamari Damacy, man.
Yeah, just roll up outer space.
Yeah, whenever you're tiny and then by the end of the level, you're rolling up fucking buildings.
Roll up the third dimension and become the fourth dimension.
I love Katamari Damacy.
What a game.
Yeah. Cool. Well, do you want to move on to our main thing?
You could emulate that on your thing, couldn't you? Because there's Katamari Damacy's on the PSP.
Yeah, I might be able to. I'll fire it up and see if it's any good.
I mean, you own those, obviously.
I own both a PSP and Katamari Damacy, so no problemo. Yeah. I just have to convert my UMD into a ROM that I own. So it's no big deal. Not a problem.
Easy peasy for an expert gamer and hacker like Chase.
Pro gamer. Do you want to move on to our main thing?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So we have another little fart sniffy conversation because the last one we did was shot from a cannon into the sun and became a cursed podcast.
Really was cursed. So, well, somewhat disturbing, truly.
Yeah, maybe we'll put it out at some point as the Cursed podcast, but who knows?
Spooky month this year.
Yeah, true. So for those of you who haven't been with us since we've last done a fart sniffy conversation, we'll sometimes indulge ourselves in overanalyzing or being academically minded about a specific topic in video games and overanalyze it to death in comparison to our normal fuckery, chud fuckery that we normally do with video games.
Chud fuckery. The name's fuckery.
Chud fuckery. I've been naming all the characters in my video games recently Chud for the most part.
Oh my god. 1D or 2Ds?
Just one. It's a respectable Chud. Chut or Chud?
Chut Buckby.
Chut Buckby is a cursed version of myself, David.
Old King Buttby.
Buttby?
It's gone one step further already.
I don't think Buttby is supposed to be the king of anything.
See, Old King Buttby is funnier than Old King Buckby, but Chut Buckby is funnier than Chut Butt, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Chut
Buckby versus Chut Buttby.
Chut Buckby feels like I'm punching the air with my mouth, whereas Chut Buttby feels like it's just sort of leaking out of my lips.
Yeah, there's something special about the Chut, the
Buckby.
In the
a lot of hard consonants.
A lot of hard consonants in there. Chut Buckby.
So today's very distinguished conversation, we
have to get it all out beforehand.
Yeah, for real.
The chuddery.
The chud fuckery. We thought we would talk about difficulty in video games, being that David just conquered video games, I guess.
At least one of them.
At least one of the very difficult ones. So here's sort of my outline. Tell me if this jives with you. I was thinking just at a high level, we should figure out what the fuck difficulty actually is. Literally define it.
Okay.
I've got a list of different kinds of difficulty, and then I'll see if you can sort of agree with that list or add anything or anything like that. And then also kind of want to go through the roadmap of where difficulty has been in the past and where it's going.
Sure.
And then finally, to wrap up, we'll talk about why is difficulty?
Why is difficult? I already got good thoughts on that one, so I'm ready.
Great. So let's start at the top then. So I tried to define this, and I'm having sort of a tough time. But in trying to define what difficulty is, the best I can come up with is it is literally something that gets in the way of you completing the game. Like a game without difficulty to me is just you press a button and a sign shows up that says you won. There is no difficulty here.
Yeah.
Or a movie, right? Like there's nothing getting in the way of you experiencing the story that they have to tell.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like a mixture of things together. So it's the amount of time that it takes to develop skills appropriate to beat the challenges confronted to you. That's kind of what it feels like to me.
Yeah, and this sort of gets into the next little thing that I had jotted down about like what different kinds of difficulty there is. In trying to think about like what challenges are presented themselves, there's a lot of different kinds of stuff, right? So like I think Demon Souls would fall into like the skill check category of difficulty, right? Where like you need to press the buttons at the right time, and like learning when to do that is a big part of it, but also execution is a big part of it, of like just learning the attacks of the enemies and shit like that, or you know, to go back like Mario, right? Like you need to know when to jump and to clear the gaps and jump on the dudes and not have to die, or like Contra, I guess, right? Like
Sure.
And so there's a certain amount of literal just like performance that you have to do there. But there's other games like, say, like Myst or Monkey Island or like even 2084 or something like that, where it's not necessarily how fast you can do this, but more of a conceptualization of like, what do you have to do to continue forward? And like that oftentimes is like a puzzle, right? Like literally just thinking about it is a way to get through it. Or like Obra Dinn, right? Like you have to think about the game world to move through it, rather than like, I got to press the mouse button.
I got to press the buttons good. Yeah.
Right. And then kind of just the third one that I would say is like endurance, of being able to do any of those above things for any amount of time.
Sure.
You know, Demon Souls doesn't present you with one enemy and say, okay, beat him, and then you move on to the next one. You know, one by one, you have to like clear a bunch of it and then get through, or like just the overall game, right? Just to beat it, you have to do it quite a bit rather than like just one specific check.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that jive with you? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I see that there are different types of difficulties in games. More like cerebral difficulty where you have to think, more like reflex-based difficulty where you have to learn how to respond correctly. And then what was the other one you said?
Just like endurance, of being able to do it for a while.
Yeah, of actually being able to, to kind of, and that's kind of how I felt Last of Us 2 was difficult for me. Because I just couldn't be at that heightened level of anxiety.
Yeah.
For that long being in that world because it was so realistic and brutal. So in that way, it was kind of a hard, difficult game, but like mentally, emotionally in that aspect. But,
yeah, that's true. That's interesting because I was trying to think of what games defined each of these things at their peak, right? Like Mario and Dark Souls are skill checks. Myst and 2084 are puzzles. But endurance, I wasn't really sure. But it is true that like playing Last of Us 2 is like difficult.
Yeah.
Endurance wise, like it's hard to do a lot of it at once. And like, you know, there's some fighting in there that can be hard, but you could turn the difficulty down to like very easy.
Yeah.
And I think the endurance part of it would still be quite difficult.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or, you know, maybe there's a little bit of light puzzle solving, but even that, right? Like it's just, you can kind of bang your head against the wall until you figure it out. So yeah, that's true. Like just the process of actually playing the game and experiencing it for long amounts of time is hard. It's interesting. Okay, cool. Is there any other like sort of categories you would want to add there, or anything that like needs inclusion?
I guess the only thing that would be missing there for me would be like a competitive game.
Yeah, that's actually worth noting. Most of the things that I've been like writing and thinking about have been single player games, because competitive I feel like is a whole other beast unto itself.
Because I guess competitive then just adds the extra aspect of you have to mix the cerebral with the endurance with the reaction time. It's kind of all three together, because you have to think about what the other player is doing. Yeah. You have to be able to react quickly, and you have to have the endurance to be able to give 100% attention the whole time when you're playing. Otherwise, you're going to get sniped.
Yeah. There's also that like meta layer of difficulty too, of like knowing the person you're playing well enough.
Exactly. Or like being able to ascertain what deck they're playing in Hearthstone.
Yeah, exactly.
Or what comp they're doing in Overwatch or whatever, you know.
Yeah, so like context is a big like difficulty scaling thing there.
Yeah, I guess the being able to adapt on the fly to the context of the situation given what your opponent chooses.
Sure. That's interesting too, because like I think a lot of these challenges that are presented get easier with more context anyway. Like I feel like say for example, I don't know what game we were playing, but like Em and I were playing through some Mario game, and she's like, "Hey, I've got this puzzle in front of me. Like, what do I need to do?" And like there was, you know, a torch in one end of the room, and like I don't know, a mummy in the other side, and I'm like, "Oh, you need to burn the mummy." Like that's a thing you have to do. I don't know that from any real world experience. It's just playing enough video games to know that like
knowing the cues.
Burn the spider web, right? Like the spider web's blocking your path, like go burn it. And so like that sort of contextual knowledge I think it helps you out, but it's not necessarily something that's going to hinder you.
That's just some learned gamer knowledge.
Gamer brain knowledge. Air horns. Feels bad.
Oh, that does feel bad.
Feels pretty bad.
Presented by Balls.
We're gonna get sponsored by Balls for how much we mention.
Do
these
they
guys.
even exist anymore?
That's a great question. Let's
I
find
don't know
out
if they do.
Where Balls energy drink is sold.
They're gonna be something totally different now.
You asked, we listen. Balls, now available in variety packs.
This is the announcement I needed.
It's so hard for me to engage with Balls because they want me to say the words on their website. There's a section for find balls. There's a section for buy balls. There's a section for sell balls.
Oh no. Cursed balls.
Cursed balls.
Damn.
Oh god, there's a Balls cherry cola. Lord have mercy.
Sounds dirty.
Horrible. Anyway, I don't want to go down the Balls swamp hole.
Chase.
I know. It's right there.
You just had to do the last one before we left, huh?
Gotta go out on a high note.
I'm leaving the swamp hole.
Great. Okay, so let's. I would love to walk through the history of difficulty with you.
Okay.
Or at least as far as I understand it.
And we're good with the definitions of difficulty and everything.
I think so. If there's one that pops up in your head, or if it feels like we're sort of missing an obvious section here, then definitely chime in.
Okay.
We can addendum our list.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so as far as I see it, and again, chime in if I'm wrong about any of this or I'm missing a piece, but as far as single player games go, here's sort of what I'm thinking for how difficulty has evolved over the years.
Okay.
So to me, the kind of start of this is like the arcade game level of difficulty, where they were trying to strike a balance between the game being fun and also draining quarters from people. So like you want to make it pretty difficult to play it for long amounts of time before you have to feed it another quarter. And so a lot of the time this meant like the first few levels of like Pac-Man or Donkey Kong are like fairly straightforward. And like if you've played it once or twice, you can feasibly get through those levels pretty confidently. But usually the difficulty scales and spikes almost immediately after that, where like the third or fourth level of Galaga is fucking difficult, right? Like you really have to be good at the game to get past that. And I that's definitely intentional of like, you know, it's fun and you should play it, but we're definitely going to make it hard for you after a certain point so that like the people who are really into it will stay here, keep feeding it quarters, or the people who aren't that good will die, maybe have some fun and keep starting over or whatever. So there was that. I think there was also the alternative that sprung up a little while after that, wherein you could choose to like continue an arcade game.
Yeah.
So something like Turtles in Time or something like that, where
Turtles in Time,
absolute slapper. Love
great
Turtles
game.
in Time.
Yeah.
Where you could continue. So like your game wouldn't stop necessarily, but you also didn't have a ton of lives, right? So if you wanted to beat the game, you could, but it would take you, you know, $5-10 of quarters or something like that if you want to get through it. So yeah, still mainly derive or
trying to drain you. The
pretty
original
much, right.
microtransaction.
Pretty much. And like, you know, some games are more obvious about that than others, but I think game designers have to have been conscious that that was like sort of the point. But also, you know, trying to make a fun game. Like it's going to continue to keep people there if your game is fun.
Make it fun, but just kick you while you're down a couple of times.
Right. So let's see. The next like step, as far as I see it, is like the first couple of console games, and that they like largely inherited a lot of the game design paradigms of arcade games.
Yeah.
So like, you know, the OG Mario games could have been on an arcade cabinet and made a lot of sense. The difficulty spikes seems a little bit less pronounced, but you still have to be like really good at the game if you want to complete it.
You have to be on it.
Yeah. So like, you know, the experience of playing those games oftentimes didn't involve beating it, right? Like, you know, I've played a lot of Mario 3, right? I've only beat it like once or twice. And I'm sure that's true for a lot of those games, right? Like you and I talked about Altered Beast a couple episodes ago. Neither of us had beaten that game, but we had played a lot of Altered Beast.
Yep.
And so, you know, it's the difficulty's there. It's maybe a little bit less like we want you to stop playing this game and continue feeding us quarters, but it's still incredibly difficult. Like the games are really hard.
Yeah, I think it could just be a function of, you know, we just didn't have enough space to make like a long game. So we just make it really hard so you still get a lot of play out of it. It's just you have to really get good to beat the whole thing. Because then once you do get good, you can beat the whole thing in like half an hour, 20 minutes, right? Once you figure everything out.
Or sort of with the contextual knowledge that we were talking about before, right? Like if you know the sort of like warp hacks that are not hacks, but like tricks in Mario 3, you can get through the game really quickly by just like warping to the end.
Yeah.
Versus like, you know, going through literally every level or anything like that. So yeah, I think, you know, obviously there were games that would sort of allow you to, you know, track progress and maybe not have to do it all in one go. But by and large, like the industry as a whole was very much focused on like making games that could be beaten in 20 minutes by the best player on the world or in the world be pretty lengthy for the average player.
Yeah.
So, you know, difficulty still very, very high at this point. The next sort of like shift, as far as I can tell, was like, you know, in the next couple of generations of consoles. So think of like Mario 64 or something like that, where the game, the challenge of the game shifted from one long, difficult game to sort of like micro challenges, right? So
yeah. So it wasn't like you die and you go back to the beginning of the level no matter what, right? So it started becoming a little bit more forgiving
in a sense, right?
in one sense of the word, right?
Yeah, so like the rather than having these like long extended challenges, it's like you could save your game if you had a memory card and do a couple levels, and maybe one of them is incredibly difficult, like as hard as a Nintendo game or something like that, like the original Nintendo games. But if you die, you don't have to go back to the beginning of Mario 64. You just go back to where you were before. And so the difficulty both expanded and contracted, right? Like any given challenge was mostly just this little bit of a level that you had to complete. But I think in allowing you to save, the new sort of macro challenge was beating the game, right? Like it was this long road that you could walk day after day to get to beating the game. Whereas like the other one was essentially like a craft that you were practicing before. Like I'm getting better at Mario 3 and eventually I will be good enough to beat it, versus I'm putting hours into Mario 64 to beat it eventually.
But they did keep that craftsmanship in there too, with collecting all the stars.
Yeah, definitely.
So it wasn't just, that was I guess the first time where there was kind of like more of that added bonus difficulty that was optional if you wanted to tackle it.
Yeah.
You could go for all the
that's
stars.
true. Like there was a range of beating versus like completing, which wasn't really there before, right? Like you either beat Mario 3 or you didn't. I guess you could say like, I didn't use any warp tricks or anything like that to beat it, but still like you got to the end, you beat Bowser, that's it. Versus like I beat Mario 64, or my name's Garen Kazanjian and I got every single star. That's just what I do. Garen Shadow of the Week. Goddamn, dude. The man's devoted. He's currently on a mission to get all the moons in Odyssey.
He's a moon. He now has the title of Moon Machine.
That's true. Yeah.
He's had the title of Moon Machine.
Unstoppable force.
He's got a lot of fucking moons. He's gonna get them all. I believe it.
Yeah. He's like a freight engine. Like it's kind of hard to get him going initially, but like very difficult to stop once he's moving.
Garen the Freight Train Kazanjian. That's a solid nickname.
That is a solid nickname.
Solid nickname.
Gamer Freight Train.
Game Earn
Freight Train. Rolls right off the tongue.
Game Earn Freight Trainsian.
It's really catchy. I love how catchy it is.
It's really easy to say.
Okay, so let's see. So you saw a bunch of games popping up at the time of like the same sort of deal of allowing you to save your progress, right? So like Banjo-Kazooie, DK64, all that sort of stuff. Or, even GoldenEye, right? Like you're able to do missions one-on-one and then save and come back and do it later. And so it felt like a lot of the purpose of these games is like the challenge it was setting forth to you was, can you do enough of these levels until you're done, essentially, rather than can you get good enough at the whole entire game to beat it.
Yeah.
So yeah, a little bit of a shift there. You're smiling. You've got something, don't you?
I'm keeping my secrets.
Okay, cool. Let's see. So the next like sort of shift that I think happened was this slide to making games a lot more accessible and easier for the most part. I think those two things are different a lot of the time, making them more accessible and making them easier. Like, I think accessibility means allowing people to change the difficulty if they want to.
Sure.
Or just requiring a lot less buy-in from the player.
Yeah.
Like something like Monster Hunter requires a significant amount of buy-in because you have to figure out all the different systems in that video game.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot happening in Monster Hunter. That like needs contextualization, right? Like you need somebody who's played it a lot to be like, oh, well, you have to do this, or this is how the hunts work, or something. Whereas, something like Mario Odyssey requires very little buy-in. You can jump into that game and it's fun immediately. You don't really need to have it explained to you. But I think there was this sort of middle section, and like, I think Skyward Sword very much embodies a lot of this, of the Zelda game Skyward Sword. There's like a lot of tutorial, and there's a lot of dialogue, and there's a lot of explanation of how the video game works.
Yeah.
Outside of sort of the story, like there's just a lot of like, okay, your first mission is to pick up this box and take it down the hall, or something like that. And so I think game designers at the time, if I'm reading this correctly, were very much trying to smooth over a lot of those difficulty spikes that were there before.
Yeah.
And I think that's because they had a story to tell, or they wanted their their mechanics to shine a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, for a lot of time that's true, right? Like, I think Wind Waker did this pretty well, like striking a balance of, it being kind of difficult, but not explaining to you literally every part of how that game works.
Yeah.
But by and large, you saw games get a lot easier over that decade. And no shade on that. I think that there's a lot of gamer hate for games that are perceived as easy or too much, tutorial in it.
Yeah, a lot of hand holding.
Yeah, and like I don't think that's a fucking problem. Like if the game is easy but it's a cool game, then that's just a cool game. I don't really give a shit if it's easy or not.
Yeah. If it's still fun, it's still fun.
Yeah, like, I don't think Katamari is a particularly difficult game, but it's fucking fun every single time. Like it's good. Like the challenge is not necessarily like how good can you roll or something. Like there's a couple of levels that are harder, but a lot of the time it's just like go hang out and have a good time. Like that's cool. So I don't necessarily see that slide into easier difficulty as a bad thing.
But I mean, I guess what generation are you talking about? Like PS2 era?
So what I'm thinking of here is sort of the late PS2, early PlayStation 3 era of games.
Sure, I see that.
Like,
yeah.
Skyward Sword is sort of indicative of this thing to me. I'm trying to think of other games that were coming out at the time. A lot of like shooters were big at the time, and they were pretty straightforward. But I think with that,
it's like a lot of smoothing out the edges, but making it almost too smooth.
In a way, I think the bigger issue with a lot of the design here is over tutorialization. Like you can definitely make a game easy, and that's totally cool. But I think a lot of the time, people were trying very hard to make sure, like, hey, if somebody's never played this game, how are they going to feel? And that's absolutely an important thing to consider. But I think, in the last 5 years, even, there's been huge strides in being able to just show the player, like, here's what you can do without having to have, like, hello, my name is King Broderick, and I am going to show you how to fire an arrow or something.
Oh, God. Who was it in that Spider-Man game? Oh, my gosh. The Evil Dead guy?
Bruce Campbell.
Bruce Campbell.
Yes.
Bruce Campbell.
Yes.
So he's like the hello everybody, I'm Bruce Campbell. I'm going to teach you how to play the game.
Right, yeah.
In one of I think Spider-Man 2, the movie game?
Let's see. Yeah, I think you're right. Spider-Man 2, the game. So I'm assuming that's the movie tie-in.
The one with the real good web slinging.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just remember there was a lot of tutorial with him. Just going through it.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of things going on there, but I think games were becoming more complex as a whole at that time. Like there was a lot of mechanics, and when you have a controller that is on an order of magnitude more complicated than 2 buttons and a directional pad, it can be sort of hard to be like, I'm scared to trust the players enough and my own game design enough to know that they're going to know what to do here.
People were still getting used to the third dimension and everything you could do in it.
Yeah. Whereas I think that there's a lot greater just like general context that's out there already. And I'd like, again, especially with games, like really learning how to do a good tutorial, I think it's helpful. But anyway, this brings me to sort of the next section, which is kind of late 2000s to 2010-ish. It's pretty much whenever Demon Souls came out, that there was this shift for an appreciation of more difficult games.
Yeah.
But I think that hand in hand with that comes with the balancing of game systems to make the difficulty be able to be appreciated correctly. Like,
sure,
there are a lot of fucking hard Nintendo games, and a lot of them are just not fair to you.
It's just not. The difficulty gets in the way of the fun at that point because it just feels unfair.
Yeah, and like, something like the like Lion King game or whatever on Super Nintendo, where there's like, I think it's that second or third level wherever he's doing the Can't Wait to Be King song, and he's getting tossed around by elephants, and you have to know exactly the order with which to jump from elephant or giraffe or whatever. Like, the only way to beat that is to just memorize it, like figure out exactly the order that you need to do and know when can I make this jump and when can I not make this jump. And that's not fair difficulty. That's just like, you got to memorize the pattern, right? Like, that's not necessarily fun, but it is quite difficult. Whereas a lot of the Demon Souls and the games that would come after that, they teach you the lessons of the game, which, full disclosure, are difficult to learn, right? Like, it's not easy to learn those lessons that the game is trying to teach you, or something like Spelunky, right? Like, you got to die a lot for that game to be enjoyable.
Most definitely.
But eventually, right, like, the game builds enough trust with the player to say, like, hey, these big guys that are going to come down on you, their swings kind of take this long generally. So like you can figure out when to roll, right? Like they're not going to pull a lot of punches. There's a big guy coming at you. And look, it looks like he's about to swing. You should roll. Yeah. Like enough of that. Yeah. And the player can feel confident to sort of like go, approach any challenge that they have. And then that sort of brings us up to closer to modern day, where I think a lot of games have taken influence from Demon Souls and Dark Souls, right? Like you see that in Assassin's Creed with the combat, or, Breath of the Wild with this like vast open environmental storytelling where you're like, holy shit, how did this mountain get cut in half or something like that?
Right.
And there's a lot of stuff in there, but I think, there's a shift more towards the center of difficulty rather than like, these games should be as frictionless as possible.
Sure.
Yeah. Does that sort of track with your understanding of gaming and shit like that?
I'd say so.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing sticks out to me as far as difficulty in gaming goes where any of that was false or I think we were missing anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think things got really hard in the beginning.
Yeah.
They chilled out gradually over time until a point where it went too far in the other direction and people wanted more, being talked to like they're a thinking person.
Yeah.
As opposed to not having to do like an hour-long tutorial to figure out how to do things. Yeah. So it was very refreshing when those games came out where it's just like, just plopped you in. It's really hard and you just got to figure it out.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
So challenge accepted. So definitely brought that this kind of satisfaction of autonomy back into the game. And, being able to be like, oh, I didn't even know I could do this. And then make things like super easy. Like if you just were missing that one mechanic that they didn't tell you about, and you're like, oh, wow, this is great.
Yeah.
I can do this forever now.
Yeah, totally.
It's almost a sense of discovery within not just the game world, but with the actual gameplay itself, which hadn't been around for a bit.
Yeah, that's true. It sort of like segues kind of nicely into why is difficulty.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a bunch of different lessons that you could take from this, like why people have implemented difficulty in the first place. But to me, there's just a handful of like, to get money from people, right? Like arcade cabinets. There's also adding difficulty to artificially lengthen a game, right? If Contra was easy and you could just walk through it, it wouldn't be a very long game. But they've artificially increased the length because it's harder. And then I think also the third and the kind of difficulty you're seeing applied in a lot of Demon Souls is to provide satisfaction to the player with being able to like apply the lessons of the game to the game, right?
Yeah.
With saying, here's some things we're going to teach you. Go play with that, essentially. Same thing with Breath of the Wild, right? Like you get to go interact in this world where they teach you, okay, you can freeze some air, you can use your little glider, and you can, make objects stasisize or whatever, and like go figure it out. There's plenty of stuff to go do out there, so like go do it.
Yeah.
And so the difficulty isn't necessarily like we want to make a game of a certain length or anything like that, or to take your money, but it's like, we want you to feel like this world is alive and responds to your decisions.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think nowadays they're really trying to tap into what in psychology they call flow.
Yeah.
Right. And with a lot of, modern difficult games like a Zelda, like a Demon Souls or Dark Souls or something like that, where, and if anybody's not familiar with this concept, it's kind of pretty well known in pop psychology at least, but it's essentially where the intersection of skill and difficulty meet in any sort of given task creates a state of flow where you kind of get in the zone for lack of a better term, right? Time kind of slows down and you're just kind of in this constant state of satisfaction where you're either good enough to barely overcome every challenge or almost good enough to overcome every challenge. So it just keeps you engaged and satisfied constantly. And I definitely felt that over the weekend with Demon Souls.
Yeah.
Once I kind of broke the seal. And even though I was super strong, I still felt like, it was challenging enough to keep my attention and it still caused me to think and react to things that was engaging still. So it definitely got me in a state of flow where I could play like 20 hours over that weekend and just beat the game.
Yeah.
So, and did not feel like that at all.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting. I feel like they probably have read about that concept and are trying to tap into it personally, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. I've definitely seen like GDC talks where people are trying to figure out like how best to get people there. There's something to be said for like who you're designing for and like who you're designing for, I think is like really the important thing here, because I think it's becoming easier to design for specific people and give them an experience that's very satisfying to them specifically. But as a fan of the series, I totally get that, like, Demon Souls is fucking hard, and I don't blame somebody if they're like, this sucks. Like, I don't like this at all.
Yeah.
Or any of the FromSoft games, right? Like, it's the sort of experience that you almost need, like, either a person there to say, like, hey, let me help you learn these lessons faster, or a guide, right, to say, like, here's some viable builds, or you should learn this kind of magic, or this is a good starting class, or something like that.
Yeah.
To sort of help you along. And I think that's almost a privilege, right? Like, to be able to put in enough time to get there. Like, plenty of people don't have enough time to get good at Dark Souls.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, like, you've sort of narrowed your audience there, or literally just, like, what if somebody can't use the controller that's, the default PlayStation 5 controller, the default Xbox controller? Like, it's going to be hard to play Demon Souls. And I know that there's other ways to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a good thing. But, if you decrease the accessibility of these games and design it for a specific person, I think it potentially can be a more satisfying experience, but that sort of limits certain people from being in that experience as well.
Are you talking about ableism?
A little. Yeah.
Sure.
I think that, it's more than that, but I think, it's not necessarily just a physical thing, although I think that is the easiest solution to address, or not necessarily the easiest, but, like, the one that you should solve, right? Like, make this an experience that's accessible literally for everyone, as far as, like, just physical ability goes, or physical accessibility goes.
Sure.
But I do think that, like, the debate was rolling around last year or whatever of, like, should Dark Souls have a difficulty slider? And to me it should. Like, I think, if you don't have the privilege of having enough time to sink 20 hours in over the weekend, right? Like,
sure.
It can be hard to play that game, and that limits people from a really cool experience of, like, this environmental storytelling and, like, this really cool world and these gorgeous, like, vistas and shit like that. And I don't see Dark Souls' only thing that is good about it as being a hard fucking game. That does make it really cool. And, like, that makes it really fun for a person like myself who can sink a bunch of time into it. But I think you should open your game up for this sort of stuff, right? Like, whenever I play a Halo game, I almost always play on heroic, because I heard the devs say one time, that's kind of what we're designing for. Like, that's where we want most of our players to land. And I'm like, okay, so, like, that's sort of their desired experience. I'm sure if FromSoft came out and said, yo, it's expert or nothing, like, okay, I'll play on that difficulty, dude. Like, if that's the experience they're sort of getting at, like, I'll get there. I don't think that the option of dropping the difficulty slider at some point will make me feel like, oh, I'm cheating myself out of a cool experience or something.
Sure. But I feel like difficulty sliders are never implemented well, in my opinion. I feel like either there's too much variance sometimes between them, right? So normal is pretty easy, and then the next level up is just, like, way too hard, and the next level down is way too easy. So it's just, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of them, because then I then have to spend more time thinking about, like, okay, where do I go? What do I do? Should I be changing the difficulty? Does it matter? Like, why am I playing this game? Yeah. So I do kind of appreciate the whole entire, hey, just here's the one level of difficulty, go for it. It certainly reinforces the idea that there is a way to get through this game. Like, we're not going to make it unfair for you, right? Yeah. And I think that may just be, to me, that's more of a argument to say game designers should design a game to be played on expert, but if you want to tune down the difficulty to where it's, like, something that could be perceived as too easy, still give that option. Like, I don't really care if there's an option for it being easier than it is, if I know that the developer's intent is to do, like, the expert is the way to play this game. Sure. So yeah, go ahead. So here, I have a question. Yeah. So instead of having, like, a difficulty slider for a game like a Dark Souls or a Demon Souls, how about you just give, if someone wants an easier experience, you just give them a higher soul level at the beginning, or just let them collect souls at a faster rate. Yeah. Instead of changing how difficult the enemies are. Yeah. If that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, Hades did this in a really cool way. Hades has, like, something called God mode,
which is like essentially like an easier version of the game. And what it does is the enemies all behave exactly the same. You just, every time you do a run, you essentially get like 1 or 2% stronger automatically. Like you don't have to do anything. You just eventually get to the point where you are blowing through this game because it's made you so powerful.
Sure.
And so you still have to learn the lessons that the game is trying to teach you, right? Like it's not going to make the enemies like dumb or something. Like,
yeah,
I think the same thing could be said for Dark Souls, right? Of like, I don't want them to change the behavior of the enemies. I just maybe want the scaling to make more sense for somebody who wants to blow through it faster, right?
Sure.
And I think that sort of approach is totally viable, right? Because you're still able to engage with the game the same way somebody playing on a different difficulty would be, except that, you know, you're essentially doing it faster. Because that's at this point my issue, right? Of speed. Like, if somebody wants to experience it and they want to play it on a quote unquote easy difficulty, the easy solution is just allow them to do that faster than I can. And like, it may be for somebody who really wants to dig in and play a bunch, a fun experience, right? To have to kind of like grind and figure it out and see like what works best. But maybe offer a God mode where, you know, maybe your health bar doesn't ever reduce, or your souls don't get left behind, or the number required to get up to the next level is a lot lower overall, so that at some point you are pretty strong in this game and like not undefeatable, but you know, it's easier, I guess.
So who are we making that mode for?
I think mostly people who don't have as much time as I do. Somebody who's like,
so you're thinking about like parents,
or somebody, you know, who works 2 jobs or something like that, but like loved Bloodborne, but doesn't have as much time for it now, or something like that. Or anything like that, right? There's a multitude of reasons why somebody wouldn't have enough time to like engage with it, but it still offers that person the option to go explore this very cool space that they have. I think with something like Hades, that makes a ton of sense, because, you know, the draw of the game is like experience all these characters and seeing how the game sort of concludes and where the story goes. And I think with Dark Souls, if you're not there for the difficulty, then the storytelling is really cool. The sparseness of like where they go with it is really interesting. The world itself is just gorgeous. And so experiencing those things without having to overcome the sort of monumental difficulty spikes are...
The monumental.
It sounds like a boss, didn't it?
That's a person in Demon Souls.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's the little kid. He's called the Monumental. Sounds like someone with a lot of time blew through the game.
I absolutely did.
I know you don't watch cutscenes.
Normally, any of the text, I'm just like, gung, 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 gung. Just get through it.
You're such a chud. That's the most chud thing you've ever said on this podcast, for certain.
Especially,
don't make me read the story.
So for clarity, that's not why I'm in Demon Souls, right? Like, I'm in Demon Souls because I like the challenge. I like it to be a little bit difficult, but I also am pretty cognizant of the fact that that's not an experience that I think everybody wants or should have. Like,
are all games supposed to be for everybody, though?
I think
are
they
all
should
movies supposed to be for everybody? Like,
no, but I think games are specific in that sense, that like the things that keep you from them shouldn't be how hard it is or how much time you have available to engage with it. You might not like the look or the story that Dark Souls is telling. That's fine, right? Like, they don't need to make themselves accessible in that way. But I think just literally the physical aspect of playing the game should be available for somebody who wants it.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, that's actually all I had.
Cool.
So yeah, overall, it's such an integral part of game design, is understanding and thinking about difficulty and like who you're designing for. And so it's sort of a fascinating conversation to track how that's evolved over the years.
Yeah.
Because it really has changed. And I think, you know, game designers are using it more consciously now, rather than like, you know, I have to make Assassin's Creed 90 hours or something like that.
Right.
Like, it's okay to make a small game if it's, you know, tailored well and made well. I think, you know, a cool solution to that problem is definitely this game can be hard if you don't know what you're doing, but also if you do, you can get through it pretty quick. I think that's kind of a cool solution.
Sure. But
like we said, you know, I think a lot of games could do with modes that make it different, or modes that make it more accessible for folks. So yeah.
I hear you. Games are for everybody.
Games are for fucking everybody. As Tim Rogers says, video games forever, dude. Fucking rips.
Video games forever and always. For everybody and everything.
I watched a 4-hour review that Tim Rogers put up of this like high school dating game.
A 4-hour review?
It's 4 fucking hours, David.
Wow.
It's incredible.
What does he have to say for 4 hours?
That's what I said. I'm like, I have to watch this because there is no way he can possibly talk about these video games for that long. And he definitely did.
It's damn impressive. All right. More power to him.
Yeah. I can't remember what it was. There was some game that he reviewed that was longer than the game. Like his review of the game was longer than the game. It was
That's
just
funny.
incredible.
He's on a different level for sure.
Yeah. It's worth a watch.
Yeah.
I also, there's a section in the middle of that review that is just him sort of like playing through parts of the game and walking through it. I absolutely like was kind of tired and taking a nap at that time. It was so enjoyable. So enjoyable. It's like video game ASMR to just have Tim Rogers talking in the background, like this dude's like verbose ass voice just talking about high school dating games. It's incredible.
All right. Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah. Okay. Hell yeah. Video games forever, as he says. Difficulty's cool. Would you like to wrap up?
Yes.
Cool. David,
Hey, Chase, we're on Twitter.
Oh, nice. Hell yeah.
I knew it was coming. Interact with us on there. Chase will tweet you back something. Maybe obviously Podtimists, but maybe a little sexy too.
Depending on what you need.
Yeah, depending on what you need. If that's what you need, it will not happen. We promise.
I'll just send you a picture of a cute dog or something.
Cute dog. Chase loves Shiba Inus and corgis.
Yeah.
So,
and my sweet Boston Terrier.
And a sweet Boston Terrier.
She's a beautiful little girl.
If you really want to help out the podcast,
yes,
leave us a review on Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, hell yeah. That's a great idea, David.
Please, a 5-star would be preferred, but tell the truth. Tell the truth. A little constructive criticism never hurt anybody.
This podcast fucking sucks.
Just be nice and constructive about it, please. I'm very sensitive. I read everything. I haven't read a single one.
David doesn't want the bad vibes.
I don't want the bad vibes. There's too many bad vibes in the world. I can't handle more. Yeah, I think, did I miss anything?
There has to have been something else. Oh, another great way to spread the word of pod is to share it with a friend. If you got some friends who are into video game podcasts, you could say, hey, I got a great one for you. They recorded a Nier episode last week, and it was lost into time, the void.
And space.
So
yeah, much like video games, video game podcasts are also for everybody.
It's true.
Now you know.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Chase, do you have any video game wisdom for us this week?
I do, David.
Let's hear it.
Some video games are hard. Some video games are easy. Some video games are just right. A lot of video games are cool, and their difficulty is charming.
Umbasa.
Umbasa. Oh God. Let's finish this video game wisdom with a little. We'll go back and forth. I always enjoy this part.
Okay, sure.
So let's see. Let's do a co-op run of the outro here.
Let's do it. All right, I'm ready.
Okay. Video games. I'm just gonna say one word.
Make
me
feel
like
I'm
Goku.
Ooh.
Period.
Damn.
End of sentence.
I mean, I got nothing after Goku. You can't follow Goku up with something. That's the end, obviously. Video games make me feel like I'm Goku.
They do, though.
Even when it's not a video game where I'm literally Goku.
Even if it's not Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3, Final Remix Drop Distance 36.5/2.
Xenoverse XD Extra Special Edition featuring
Definitive Edition S.
Featuring Sneak King.
Featuring Yoda in Soul Calibur.
Featuring Ultra Instinct Shaggy. That was the weirdest meme for a bit.
I know. That's such a weird one.
That was so weird.
I hope that Ultra Instinct Shaggy is the new character in Smash. Sakurai's just like a year late to this meme.
I would love having Shaggy in Smash.
Okay, well, goodbye.
All right, see ya.